Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Healthy Muslim in Ramadan. We've been exploring the nature of illness, of what we do to make ourselves sick, the calamities that befall us from the will of Allah, and what the meaning of this is. What should our attitude be to others that are afflicted with illness when we are healthy? Looking at the action of the Prophet, it's clear he took other people's illnesses seriously. He was very interested in medicine. He had a wide understanding of food, of individual medicines, of techniques of treatment like cupping and venesection and so on, which we'll go into afterwards. But what impresses me is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a physician. He would go to the sick person and he'd ask him, what is your trouble? So he'd want to know, not just generally, sorry you're sick, but he'd say, in what way are you sick? Exactly what's going on here? Fever, cough, what's actually happening? He was thoughtful about the specifics of what was happening to his sick friend. Not only did he want those facts, he wanted to know how he felt about them. Was he frightened? Was he angry? Was he, did he have terrible doubts that in the provision of Allah, whatever? So what was his emotional reaction to what was going on? And then he'd ask very simply, what do you want? What do you want? What do you, as a sick person, feel you would like? What he would then do is make some prayers. He would give a prescription. He would sometimes place his hand on the forehead or chest of the individual. He would sometimes make wudu and pour the wudu water over the sick person. And he would say a prayer, one of which was, no harm will come to you, only purification by the will of Allah. When did you last have a doctor who came to see you when you were sick, who was anything like that? Okay, the doctors do ask you what's wrong with you. They say, do you have a cough? Does it hurt? What's happening? Yeah, they're inquiring. Do they ask you how you feel? Do they ask you, are you frightened about this? Do they bother to listen? Do they ever ask you what you want? I don't think so. Not only doctors have to learn from the Prophet, peace be upon him, but we do. We visit sick friends all the time. We can't be physicians. We can't ask the physician type questions. The Prophet could, because he was a physician. One of the many things he was. But we can ask them, how are you feeling? We don't have to tell them anything. Just ask them, how are you feeling? How are you today? Patients often know they're getting worse because the doctors stopped asking them that. My very best friend in the whole of my life, Veronica, we met each other in boarding school. I was 7 years old. We went through boarding school together. We were totally different individuals. She was a linguist, I was a scientist. She was probably dysnumeric, funny word, but it means people who can't understand that 2 and 2 make 4. And she had to get mathematics O-level. And I spent a great deal of time teaching her, and she passed her exam, and she, for the whole of her life, she was grateful for that. But where I knew numbers, she knew language. We complemented each other beautifully. We were two halves of one person. And through our lives, I had this automatic understanding of who she was and she of me. It was wonderful. There was this unspoken conversation between us. Even if we didn't see each other for 5 years, when we met again, we just carried on as if nothing had happened, with complete trust. She mentioned in passing she had a stomach ache, and in that second, I knew she was gravely ill. Because I'm a doctor, I overridden the provision she'd made. I got her to the right people. Indeed, she was gravely ill. She had a very bad cancer. And in the last 3 years of her life, I was closely involved as her friend. And then one day she said to me, she said, "They've stopped asking me what's wrong with me. They've stopped asking me if anything's hurting. And they just tell me that I'm looking well. Does that mean I'm getting worse?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, nobody's examining me anymore." So I said, "Okay, I'll examine you." "Oh, good," she said. And up came her clothes and she lay down. She had her stomach swollen with this horrible cancer. So I felt her belly. I said, "Oh, God, I've realized what's happened now. They've made a wrong diagnosis." "Oh," she knew I joked a lot. "Oh," I said, "you're pregnant." She was 65 years old. I said, "But it's not a baby, it's an angel. You're giving birth to yourself as an angel." "Oh, that's great," she said. So from then on, every time I saw her, up went her dress and I felt her tummy. I told her about the feathers I could feel. And this was our metaphor of talking about how she was approaching her death. And in her last admission, she by now didn't understand what the doctors were talking about. She used me as a short circuit. She said, "What are they going to do this time?" And I said to her, "It's time for the baby to be born." And she smiled. I think this shows what a privilege it is to be part of the journey of a sick person. You can't cure them, but being in the company of a sick person is not just of comfort to the patient, but it's of great benefit to the person who visits. It's important also for the family of the patient. When you see somebody who's sick, the people closest to the family may have other troubles. They may feel guilty. They may feel, "Oh, I caused this illness," if somebody has a stomach problem, "because I didn't cook properly, or I didn't prepare the food properly." Or they might feel, "I didn't put a muffler on my husband. He's got pneumonia now, and when he went out the other day, I should have wrapped him up better." It's extraordinary how difficult it is for people who love someone to understand that they will become sick, whatever you've done. And as an outside visitor, you can help those who love and are close to the person who's sick. You can help them not blame themselves, not feel that what they see as an illness is something that they're racked with guilt about. But there's also a general cultural benefit. There's something very sick with our society. This is the rantings of an old lady, and those of you who are young, please ignore it. But I've watched, in the 70 plus years of my life, a change in society. The change is one towards what I call a me society, the cult of the individual, the power of the self, the importance of I, empowerment. These are all very strong words, and they're things by which you are made to feel important. Look at advertising. If you go to Africa or the Far East, and you look at advertising for baby milk, you'll see a loving family, which includes a baby and a can of milk. You come to the West, you see the baby and the can of milk. We even empower babies with their own solitude, the power of themselves. They're not going to buy the milk, but we don't even see a baby in the setting of a culture. This is a deep sickness in Western society. In sickness, you discover that maybe you can help. When the person recovers, they're grateful. Is gratitude appropriate? Not really, because there is an eternal chain of giving. If you've been able to help someone to recover to wholeness, don't accept gratitude. Tell them to learn from being helped and give that help to another person. And then the chain of loving and helping a person through illness will go on and empower the culture that that person is in. Please join me after the break. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. We've been discussing the profound sensitivity and lessons to be learnt in what the Prophet Muhammad would do when he visited a sick person. How clear he was about identifying what was wrong, how sensitive he was in asking how the patient felt, and how sweet he was in making sure he knew what the person wanted for themselves. One of the things that it can be very difficult for the sick person to share is any sense they might have of shame about how they came to be sick. A physician who's been in practice for any length of time will come across people who have sexually transmitted diseases that have occurred because of some adventure that the patient would really prefer didn't reach the light of day. And the compassion and sensitivity that you need to show these people suffering in this way is really important. A lady who I love to pieces, who is a friend and herself very profound, came to me with some stomach problems. And after tests, it became clear that she had a condition in which a bug called gonorrhea had spread and caused a peritonitis. It's a very serious condition. It became apparent that her husband regularly consorted with prostitutes, which she didn't know. She therefore had to work out, what was she going to do? Was she going to confront her husband? She had to, because he had to be tested and treated. Was she going to scream at him? Was she going to hit him? Was she going to be angry with him? Her illness had been caused by her husband, and she felt shame. She felt dirty as a consequence of his actions. And I said to her, hold on. At the moment, all we need to do is treat you, because we'll treat him in your good time. I want to care about you first. Let's think about this, talk about this, and pray about it. And after the initial first pass responses, tears, anger, denial, all of these psychological processes, she realized that none of us are without blame. Isa salam, when asked about a legal question, could the Jews stone a woman taken in adultery? It's part of Jewish law that is possible. He was being given a tricky question because he was representing something different to the existing Jewish canon, and yet he was an expert in Jewish law. What was his response? Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. So she was able to forgive her husband because reaching back in her memory of herself, she realized she could find instances where she was not perfect. So by the time she told her husband that she had contracted gonorrhea from him and that he had to be treated, and they needed to have a conversation, she approached him with compassion, and he was able to be helped in his bad actions. And they now have a very happy marriage. It would have been very easy for an unthinking health service of the type we've got just to treat her gonorrhea. I mean, why should they bother about her marriage? What's that got to do with anybody? But if you're thinking in your friendship, whether as a physician or a friend, how the person can come to terms with the element of shame that comes with this illness, a great good can come of it. The addict who comes to you, having maybe bankrupted his family because of a gambling habit, acquired cancer because of a cigarette habit, gone into liver failure because of his alcoholism, the addict feels shame because he's brought this illness on himself. But why is he an addict? Addiction is a spiritual illness. Underneath the addict is someone seeking for a greater truth that they're trying to find in another way. They're trying to find it in illusion, but the search is valid. Many holy men are very grateful to have heroin and cocaine addicts approach them because they know they can be helped. It's the person who's addicted to fame and money that is in much greater difficulty. So don't look at your person in liver failure from alcoholism as a person who's rubbished his life and therefore not is worthy of your contempt. See it, this is the point that you can make them change. It is the point at which change is possible. People may, for the first time in their life, be frightened of dying. If you have an illness that's potentially serious, you've never had that illness before. You know, of course you know about dying. You see it in the movies all the time. But not me. That's different. In Hadith, when you go into a sick person, reassure him concerning his appointed lifespan, for that does not contradict the decree, and it sets the patient's mind at ease. Remind them, it's not your responsibility. God will arrange for you to die when he wants. You don't know when it's going to be, and you can't control it. You can't influence it. What have you done to cause this disease? It's in Allah's hands. Trust him. Ask for help. If he's not going to cure you, pray for understanding so that you can greet him in heaven with a very happy heart and not resent the fact that you've been taken from this world. It is very transient. Remember that sometimes your patient can be too good. What do I mean by that? I'm thinking of someone I know at the moment. I've watched him for many years. And I've watched something evolving, which at the moment I don't have a solution for, because it requires spiritual healing, and I'm not a spiritual healer. I've got to find somebody for him. That's my current preoccupation. I first knew Michael when he was an addict. Addicts are never addicted to one thing. They're searching everywhere. And as I said, addiction is a spiritual disease. But often addiction comes from a very lonely place in a person's heart. And I came to know Michael's father was a sadistic bully. He was by far the harshest man I've ever met. I understood that his harshness came from his own loneliness, and it was his way of keeping anyone who tried to love him at bay. He was cold, merciless, gave no kindness to his children and no kindness to his wife. His wife was unable to protect her children, and she feels guilty to this day. And the children suffered. And Michael's way of suffering was to endlessly want to find a way to earn his father's love. Like a moth trying to get out of a window, he bashed himself against this window day after day after day, traumatizing himself and making himself fearful, anxious, and ultimately incompetent. He had married. His children are delightful. He's a good man. He has had a loving family around him. His father has died. Michael can't make it better anymore. Michael is now deeply troubled. He will never criticize his father. But now he can't speak. He has lost the capacity to speak. It's a spiritual illness, not psychological, not physical. He loves his father and will not say anything wrong. So he's made himself dumb to make sure he doesn't. It's very profound. I'm glad I've been able to share with you some of the mysteries contained in illness. Think deeply when you meet a sick person, travel with them and learn. Assalamu alaikum.